South Park didn't just throw a jab this week, it went straight for the jugular. In its latest episode, the show turned Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem into the butt of one of its darkest running jokes, dragging up her infamous puppy shooting scandal and weaving it into brutal satire. The result? Noem snapped back on national TV, blasting the show as lazy and accusing it of targeting women for their looks. But with South Park now the #1 streamed show in America, her outrage only made the mockery louder. The real question is, did her furious response just hand South Park an even bigger win? South Park strikes again.
Breaking news, the new head of Paramount telling CNN he is standing by South Park after another utterly scathing episode about the Trump administration. The latest episode hitting a nerve.
South Park has never been a show that shies away from controversy, and this time Kristi Noem was the one caught in its unforgiving spotlight. The latest episode didn't just take a lighthearted jab at her political life, it resurrected one of the most haunting and divisive scandals tied to her name, the admission that she once shot her own puppy. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the masterminds behind the series, transformed that real-life incident into a dark but razor-sharp running gag. They framed it as the ultimate symbol of her so-called tough choices, a phrase that, in the context of their satire, dripped with both irony and cruelty. Watching the scene unfold in cartoon form was both shocking and unsettling, yet it was exactly the kind of unflinching humor that has kept South Park a cultural lightning rod for nearly 3 decades. Audiences were hooked, unable to look away, some laughing nervously, others cringing, because the sting of the parody reached far beyond the animation itself.
Head of Homeland Security.
The show drawing from a real-life scandal.
A few years ago, I had to put my puppy down by shooting it in the face.
In the storyline, Noem appeared as the freshly promoted head of Homeland Security, commanding recruits with a stern presence while her puppy shooting scandal hovered like an invisible shadow. It wasn't just about poking fun at her political persona. It was about questioning what kind of leaders are entrusted with power. South Park pushed viewers to consider the gap between the image politicians try to sell and the actions that define them. The shock factor worked on multiple levels. It wasn't simply there to make people laugh, it was biting social commentary. By grounding the joke in something Noem had publicly acknowledged, the satire carried the weight of truth, which made it all the more piercing.
A theme of the episode.
Mr. Mackey?
When Trump budget cuts caused the school counselor to look for a job with ICE.
What has always set South Park apart is its uncanny ability to stretch reality to absurd extremes while still keeping it tethered to facts. In Noem's case, the writers didn't have to invent anything outrageous. The story was already strange and disturbing enough. All they had to do was magnify it and let the absurdity speak for itself. That blend of humor and honesty is why people still flock to the show in massive numbers. With this episode helping to cement its status as the most streamed series in the country, South Park once again proved that its brand of humor resonates in ways that polished news segments often can't. The sting for Noem comes not only from the content of the parody, but also from its timing. At a moment when Trump's allies are scrambling to project unity, strength, and relevance, South Park managed to reduce one of his key figures to a punchline defined by ridicule and moral doubt. For viewers, it was both hilarious and damning. For Noem, it was a reminder that no matter how carefully politicians try to control their image, satire has the power to shatter it in minutes. That's why, even after nearly 30 years on air, South Park still has the ability to rattle the political world with nothing more than a well-timed joke and a brutally drawn cartoon. Kristi Noem fires back on TV.
It's so lazy to just constantly make fun of women for how they look. Only the liberals and the extremists do that. If they wanted to criticize my job, go ahead and do that, but clearly they can't. They just pick something petty like that.
Kristi Noem wasn't about to let South Park's savage parody slide without a fight. Instead of ignoring the episode, she went straight onto Glenn Beck's show to give her side of the story. With the cameras rolling, she dismissed the episode as lazy and accused the writers of only knowing how to make fun of women's looks. Her voice carried that mix of anger and frustration you can feel even through the screen. She wanted to make it clear that if critics had something real to say, they should focus on her policies, not her appearance. But the way she said it, with that edge of defensiveness, made it sound less like strength and more like someone trying hard not to show how badly the hit had landed. The irony in her response is hard to miss. By going public and calling out South Park, she made the episode even more talked about than it already was. If she had shrugged it off, the scandal might have blown over after a few news cycles. Instead, her fiery remarks gave it new life. Social media lit up with clips of both the episode and her reaction, creating a back-and-forth storm of memes, jokes, and endless commentary. South Park thrives on attention, and Noem unknowingly handed them exactly what they wanted. Proof that their satire had hit the bullseye.
VP JD Vance, and this week, reserving most of its scorn for...
Welcome to the team, recruits. I'm Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security.
What makes this moment even more striking is how different her reaction was compared to other politicians who've been roasted by South Park. Some, like JD Vance, tried to play it cool by joking that being on the show meant they'd made it. Others, like Trump himself, usually fight back with their own brand of bluster. Noem's approach fell somewhere in the middle, angry but also defensive, trying to frame herself as a victim of unfair humor. Instead of softening the blow, it only made her look more rattled.
Show drawing from a real-life scandal.
A few years ago, I had to put my puppy down by shooting it in the face, because sometimes doing what's important means doing what's hard.
In the end, Noem's response told us more than the episode itself. It showed just how deeply satire can cut when it drags an uncomfortable truth into the spotlight. Her attempt to push back ended up amplifying the story, making her look thin-skinned at a time when she was trying to project toughness. For South Park, it was the perfect encore to their parody, proof that even the most powerful figures can lose their cool when a cartoon holds up an unflattering mirror. South Park's Trump universe.
Reserving most of its scorn for...
Welcome to the team, recruits. I'm Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security.
The show drawing from a real-life scandal. Insulting Mar-a-Lago, Trump's manhood, VP JD Vance, and this week, reserving most of its scorn for...
Welcome to the team, recruits.
South Park didn't stop at Kristi Noem in its latest episode. It went straight for the heart of Trump's world. The writers made sure no one in his circle was safe from mockery. Mar-a-Lago was portrayed as a tacky, almost grotesque setting, and Trump himself appeared in the kind of over-the-top parody only South Park can pull off. The big moment came when Trump promoted their cartoon version of Noem to Homeland Security chief, treating the whole situation like a ridiculous job fair. It was surreal, absurd, and yet rooted in real-life scandals that made the satire sting even more.
Remember, only detain the brown ones!
One reviewer saying, you can feel Matt Stone and Trey Parker's disdain in every frame.
What really stood out was how South Park weaved multiple issues into one storyline. The episode took shots at racism and border control, showing recruits being told to only detain the brown ones, a brutal but pointed jab at discriminatory policies. It also mocked the fallout of budget cuts, with counselors and underpaid staff suddenly finding themselves working for ICE. By exaggerating these flaws to the point of comedy, the show exposed hypocrisy in ways that a serious debate never could. It was both outrageous and uncomfortably honest, which is why it hit so hard with audiences. Another reason this episode felt so sharp is the way South Park now portrays Trump. For years, they used Mr. Garrison as a stand-in, giving them a layer of separation. But now they've dropped that shield. Trump's real image is right there on the screen, exaggerated but unmistakable. That shift makes the jokes bolder and the commentary more direct. Instead of hiding behind parody, they're confronting him head-on, and that decision changes the entire impact of the humor. It feels more urgent, more personal, and far harder to dismiss. By going after Trump, Noem, and Vance all at once, South Park proved again that it's an equal opportunity offender. The show doesn't care about party lines or reputations, it cares about exposing the absurdity of power. And at a time when politics feels heavier than ever, this kind of satire cuts through the noise in a way nothing else can. The episode wasn't just a cartoon making jokes, It was a raw cultural moment, reminding everyone that sometimes laughter is the sharpest form of criticism. The bigger picture, why this matters.
Trump, week after week, is the #1 streamed show in the United States right now. The #1 streamed show. So people are watching this.
South Park has always thrived on pushing boundaries, but the timing of its latest surge in popularity couldn't be more telling. Right now, it's the #1 streamed show in America. That alone shatters the argument from Trump's allies who keep calling it irrelevant and desperate. If anything, the opposite is true. Millions are tuning in every week, laughing at the jokes, but also absorbing the pointed criticism aimed directly at some of the most powerful people in the country. When a show that started back in the late 90s is still setting the cultural agenda today, it says something about both its staying power and the appetite audiences have for fearless satire.
You know, talk of David Ellison defending South Park. You were actually with him today. You were with David Ellison and the whole management team earlier today. And he's standing by South Park.
But behind the comedy, there's a bigger drama unfolding in the corporate world. Paramount just completed its massive merger with Skydance, and the deal raised eyebrows because of whispers about political maneuvering tied to Trump. Some even pointed to a $16 million settlement as part of smoothing the path for the merger. That kind of backroom chatter paints a picture of how entertainment companies sometimes bend under political weight to protect their bottom line, yet despite the pressure, the new CEO, David Ellison, didn't hesitate to defend South Park. He called the show not only highly profitable, but also a cornerstone of Paramount's streaming success. His message was clear. The numbers are too strong to ignore, no matter how much controversy swirls around the content. This clash of business, politics, and entertainment is what makes the situation so fascinating. On one hand, you have satire punching up at leaders, exposing hypocrisy with brutal humor. On the other, you have billion-dollar companies trying to juggle political relationships while still keeping their most profitable shows alive. The tension is obvious. How long can satire survive in a system where politics and corporate power are so tightly intertwined? For now, South Park seems untouchable. Its relevance, viewership, and profitability make it too valuable to silence. But the question lingers. Will corporate media continue to stand behind satire when political pressure ramps up, or will they eventually bend to keep powerful figures happy? The answer to that could determine whether shows like South Park remain a vital cultural check on authority or fade into cautious silence. Pop culture meets politics. The moment South Park aired its latest episode, the internet exploded. Social media timelines filled with clips, memes, and hot takes, each one sharpening the sting of the parody. J.D. Vance, who was also mocked in the show, decided to lean into it. Instead of complaining, he went online and posted just 5 words, "Well, I've finally made it." That short, playful reaction showed a kind of self-awareness. He turned his roast into a badge of honor, a way to show voters he could take a joke. Kristi Noem, on the other hand, did the opposite. She lashed out, calling the writing lazy, and accusing the creators of only mocking women's looks. Her defensive tone didn't shield her, it made her look even more rattled. In the court of public opinion, that contrast was glaring. One looked like a politician with thick skin, the other like someone cracking under pressure. What makes South Park so fascinating in this moment is how it has evolved from just a comedy show to something bigger. In 2025, its jokes don't feel like simple satire anymore. They carry weight. Millions of people stream every new episode, and it has become the #1 show in the country. That means its caricatures and storylines are shaping how viewers think about real-life figures. When the show paints Noem as a heartless Homeland security boss with a dark past, that image lingers in people's minds. When Trump is shown promoting her in absurd, self-serving ways, it reinforces existing doubts about his judgment. Comedy becomes commentary, and commentary becomes part of the political narrative. For decades, South Park has thrived on crossing lines, but this season feels different. It doesn't just offend for the sake of shock, it zeroes in on hypocrisy, corruption, and cruelty. The themes in this episode, racism and border control, budget cuts affecting ordinary workers, and the absurdity of unchecked power aren't random jokes. They're reflections of real fears and frustrations in the country. People don't just laugh at them, they recognize the truth buried inside. That's why the satire hits harder than ever. The cultural impact goes beyond laughter. By mocking politicians in ways that news reports can't, South Park turns complicated scandals into stories that everyone can understand. It makes power look ridiculous, and once that image sticks, it's hard to undo. Noem's angry response only amplified that effect. Instead of refocusing attention on her policies, she shined a spotlight on the very caricature she hated. In trying to fight the joke, she made it real. This is why satire matters. It's not just entertainment, it's accountability disguised as humor. It's the cartoon version of holding a mirror up to power and saying, "This is how ridiculous you look." And when the person in that mirror gets angry, it almost proves the satire was spot on. So the big question is this: was Kristi Noem furious because South Park was unfair? Or was she furious because the cartoon showed the world a side of her she'd rather keep hidden? So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.